Good morning, Mr. Seleka. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Are you ready?
We are ready, Chairperson.
Yes. Please administer the oath of affirmation again.
Yes, the first witness, Chairperson, for today is Ms. Venete Klein.
Yes.
Morning.
Good morning, Ms. Klein.
Morning, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Please state your full names for the record.
Venete Klein.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you, Chairperson. Ms. Venete Klein is coming for the second time in regard to the issue of suspension of the executives, and the appearance this time around is to complete her testimony in regard to that. We will be using the previous bundle, and Chairperson, is paginated differently from the bundles we have been using recently, which is the black pagination and the red pagination. In her bundle, we only have the red pagination.
Okay.
And that's Eskom Bundle 02.
The one I have here has got both black and red, and it is Eskom Bundle 02.
Oh, so they must have printed you a bundle different from mine, Chairperson.
Yes. Do you know whether the witnesses one has both?
I was going to ask her to.
Sorry, Chair, what do you want me to check?
Yeah, just
Have you got
assist
red
the
and
witness?
black numbers at the top of each page? The pagination?
No, it seems to be
the
like
red.
mine.
Only red ones?
Red ones.
It is
Oh,
like mine.
okay.
Yes, sir. Only
Okay, so we'll use red numbers, page numbers today.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, all right.
Ms. Klein is legally represented, Chairperson, by a colleague of mine. Maybe he could place himself on record.
Yes. Thank you. You can do that from there.
Thank you, Chairperson. Advocate Mahan, representing Ms. Klein, instructed by Adams and Adams.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Seleka,
Thank you, Chairperson.
you will have to try and raise your voice this morning. I think it's very low today.
I will do so, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Ms. Klein, thank you.
I hardly get asked to raise my voice.
Chairperson?
I hardly get asked to raise my voice anyway.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Klein, thank you once more for coming before the Commission to assist the Commission. So you have that file before you which contains your affidavit. You see that.
That is correct, Chair.
Ms. Klein, because we have done your testimony.
Well, you said affidavit. The first one is a statement, isn't it? The one appearing starting at page 2.
On page 2, Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Yes, it's between tram lines. It's written statement by Venete Klein to the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture on page 2. But I believe that this has been commissioned. If you go to page 24, which is the last page of the affidavit.
Well, it has been, but it's interesting. Normally, an affidavit will start with, I, the undersigned, do hereby make oath and say, and this one doesn't start like that.
Correct, Chair.
So one wonders whether she took the oath. I see the Commissioner of Oaths certifies that the deponent has acknowledged that she knows and understands the contents of this affidavit, which was signed and deposed before me on this day, and the provisions of the regulations, blah, 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 have been complied with. But Ms. Klein herself doesn't seem to have said, I swear. Okay, all right, but she has confirmed under oath that the contents of this statement are true and correct. Yeah, so that's fine.
Correct, Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Ms. Klein, in regard to the suspension of the executives, briefly, just by way of a background today, we dealt with your appointment as one of the new board members in December 2014. Correct?
That's correct. That's correct, Chair.
And from there, we addressed the activities of the board leading up to the meeting of the 9th and the meeting of the 11th March 2015.
Correct,
You
Chair.
recall that. And an issue, it's not an issue really, there was clarification needed to be done as to whether the first board meeting was that of the 26th of February 2015, which got cancelled, or whether there was a prior board meeting before that date. Correct?
Correct.
And I think you were pointing out to the chairperson that your recollection is that there was a board meeting in January
That is correct, Chair.
2015.
Yes.
I think the
I
reference.
think she was going to check
Yes.
because when she left last time, the issue was still uncertain. She was going to check. Well, obviously, Ms. Klein, you can tell me whether you checked and what you found.
Yes.
But really, I don't think there's much significance whether the meeting of the 26th of February was meant to be the first board meeting or there had been one earlier. So if it was the first or second, the fact remains that this was a new board. It hadn't had much time to do anything as a board. There may have been some committee meetings, board committee meetings, but it was a new board. Did you find anything? Were you able to find anything when you checked?
Yes, Chair. I think for me, the question I thought I was answering at the time was this the first time we had engaged with the executives? And on going back, we've actually provided a deck of all of the prior meetings. But to your point, there were various other meetings. The meeting of the 16th of January, the meeting of the 16th of February. So I believe the point I was trying to make was it wasn't like it was the first time. We certainly were a new board, but we had engaged extensively with their executives over those first 3 months.
Well, the extensive engagement between the board and the executives that I haven't had. I have heard about the induction, which I think I was told was in January. I have been told that there were a number of meetings of committees of the board as opposed to the board itself between January and 26 February. I have been told of those. And therefore, members of those committees which did meet in between January and 26 February may have interacted with some executives. That part, I think I've been told. Does that more or less
Yes,
reflect your own
absolutely,
understanding?
absolutely, Chair,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, Ms. Klein's legal representatives did provide us with a bundle that has minutes of some meetings, Chairperson. But the witnesses have come here and testified that there were some level of engagement at subcommittee levels. There is a minute of a meeting on the 16th of January 2015, where I thought maybe Ms. Klein was going to refer the chairperson to that. We already have it in the bundle.
Okay, no, that's fine. I mean, when you have applied your mind to the bundle,
Yes.
at some stage, then we can see what needs to be done, what can be done.
Okay.
But otherwise, it seems that the picture that emerges is simply that there was an induction of the board at some stage in January. There were certain meetings of committees, of certain committees of the board after the induction, between the induction and the 26th of February.
Correct.
So during those meetings of committees, there may have been some engagement between certain board members and some executives.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
May I just add something, please,
Yes,
Chairperson?
yes.
I think, just to be clear, it is the question of the engagement. But, in reading, going back from here and going to reread everything, the chairperson opens a meeting and welcomes you to the first board meeting in January.
Yes.
And then later on, we say, but that was not the first board meeting, this was, so I must say, when you read it, it can become very convoluted as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think what is of importance is the level of engagement and who was all present.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Yeah, Ms. Klein, yeah, we understand that, but just to clarify for the chairperson as well, in your own affidavit, you do say the 16th of January was the induction on paragraph 23, page 6. So it's not only the chairperson who subsequently says that was an induction, others have said the same, but you also have said the same. And remember last time I pointed out, in your statement to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, you called it a board meeting, but this affidavit subsequently done, you called it an induction.
Maybe it was a board meeting which was used as an induction.
Chairperson, it becomes, as one delves deeper and deeper into it, you pick up different things. You then
Yeah.
listen to recordings and then you say, okay, that's what I said then, because that's what I knew it to be. Then I come back here and then I go and listen to the recordings and I've got a chairperson saying to us, welcome to your first board meeting. So it becomes, all I'm trying to say, Chairperson, is that terms were used very interchangeably, which did allow for, I believe, a lot of confusion in amongst them. What were they called? What were they exactly? So it was more for me the issue of did we engage or didn't we engage? Ultimately, that's the question I was trying to answer.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Klein. So, Ms. Klein, then we went through that process, and we came to the meeting of the 9th. You say you couldn't attend the meeting of the 9th.
That is correct, Chair.
And, but we saw that you sent an email showing your interest in becoming part of the subcommittee or an ad hoc committee that was being proposed to champion, to oversee the inquiry.
That is correct, Chair.
Yes. And that was in a memorandum which we have learned was prepared by Mr. Licknell, an email of which it was attached to an email sent to board members
Correct, Chair.
with a proposal of the resolution by the board.
That's correct.
Then we have, you didn't make the meeting. We have the meeting of the 11th, because at the meeting of the 9th, the board members decided that, no, we want to see the minister.
Correct.
And the
Chair,
meeting of the 11th was convened.
True. Can I just add on to,
Yes.
for Chair, just for clarity? Obviously, after being here the last time, I went to go and look at why would I have wanted to be part of. In fact, when you showed me the email, I looked at this because my recollection was I couldn't make it. I even had objected because why is it that, you're calling meetings at such short notice? But when Mr. Seleka showed me my interest in the meeting, on reflection, Chair, remember there are two statutory committees of every board. The one is audit and risk, and the other one is social ethics and sustainability. I was the chairperson of social ethics and sustainability, which is a statutory committee of the board. These two committees are responsible for giving feedback on the runnings of the organization at an at a AGM annually. That was my reason for wanting to be a part of. I was not chairperson of people and governance at the time. Had I been, I probably would not have put up my hand for it. But as the chair of social ethics and sustainability, which is a statutory committee, I felt I was obliged to be part of any inquiry that would take place.
Yes. But remember, that email was presented to you, Ms. Klein, because you had said to the chairperson, you objected to a short notice and raised a governance issue. Recall that?
That is correct, Chair. That is exactly what I said, because I'd raised so many objections to such short notices in every meeting that I must admit, at the time, that's what I thought I had done with that one, until Mr. Seleka pointed out to me that what I had actually done was to say, I wanted to be part of it, in as much as I was traveling the next day, can't you just hold it later on in the day so that I could become part of it? So I acknowledge, Chair, exactly what you're saying.
Yes. It became apparent that the memorandum and the proposal to establish an inquiry was a request of President Zuma at the time.
It became apparent, Chair. Yes, it did.
Mr. Linnell has said to the chairperson that there seems to have been board members who met with the minister prior to the meeting of the 11th in regard to this issue of the inquiry. Do you know of that?
No, I have no idea about that, Chairperson.
When did it become apparent to you that this was the request of the president?
Because I was not at the meeting of the 9th, Chairperson, obviously board members, from what I could tell, were becoming very uncomfortable with being given a directive from the president. And calls were being made, because remember, as you correctly pointed out, I wanted to be part of it. So when I couldn't be part of it, there were calls between myself and different board members, and board members simply said, this is what...
But sorry, when did you become aware that it's a request by the president?
After the meeting of the 9th, because I was not in the meeting of the 9th, Chairperson.
That was after the meeting of the 9th?
After the meeting of the 9th.
But before the meeting of the 11th?
Correct.
Yeah. You say you didn't become part of the committee that oversaw the inquiry.
That was like I said, you showed me the email where I suggested becoming part of it, but I wasn't part of it. I certainly wasn't in the documentation.
But you certainly will recall from the board meeting that the delegation was made to people and governance and audit and risk to oversee the entire process.
That is correct, yes.
And that you were part of people and governance.
I was part of people and governance, Chairperson, but I was not chairing people and governance.
Yeah, not chairing besides the point, but yes. You didn't want to chair the subcommittee that was being established, or did you?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not, Chairperson.
You just wanted to be part of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were part of people and governance?
I was part of people and governance, and we had a chairperson of people and governance, Tembe Kosa, at that time.
And it was the people and governance that effected the suspensions?
That is correct, Chair.
Of which you were part?
That is correct.
Yes. Now, the chairperson has asked repeatedly the witnesses who have come here. We understand from Mr. Tsotsi that the executives who were to be suspended were 3.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't get that last. I didn't
The
get that.
executives who were to be suspended were 3.
Correct,
3 executives were to be suspended.
Correct.
But ultimately, 4 executives were suspended.
that is correct.
And the question has been, how did the 4th executive, which is the financial director's name, make its way into the list? Are you able to answer that question?
Chairperson, all I can say to you is that the morning that the minister was there, obviously on recollecting now or having had the benefit of being here, going away and then applying my mind again, what I recall the minister said was that the people responsible for the areas that were affected, she had no problem with being asked to step aside, because I think the discussion was about asking people to step aside. And if I remember correctly, the minister said something to the effect that the people who were responsible for the various areas would be asked to step aside, or could be asked to step aside. But she did say, but it's the board's decision, but the people who were responsible for what the board felt the areas of responsibility was, could be asked to step aside.
Did then, are you saying to the chairperson, it is at that stage that the 4th name, being the FD, was included?
It was not at the time when the minister was there. When the minister was there, my recollection was there were no names mentioned. After the minister left, which is the meeting which started at 12 o'clock, and this is where it becomes just a little bit more difficult, because, Chairperson, when I was here last time, I indicated that I had a recording of that meeting, which starts at 12:23. But the meeting actually started at 12 o'clock. And I'm not saying to prove my point, but what I am saying to you is the recording which I sent to the Commission and the recording which I got from Eskom, because I wanted to make sure that maybe the version that I had, maybe there was a fuller version. The recording I got from Eskom are actually exactly the same. It starts at 23 minutes past 12 or thereabouts, Chairperson. And in the first 23 minutes, that is when the 4 names are put to the board by the Chairperson, Zola Tsotsi. And he doesn't just put the 4 names to the board, he goes as far as giving us a reason why each of those 4 should be suspended. Now, unfortunately for all of us, those 23 minutes is not on the recording. But the rest of the recording, you can hear people fighting and saying, but the FD should not be included because, who's saying that she must, So my recollection of the whole thing is, by the end of the meeting, that starts at 12, even though the recording starts at 12:23, and that ends at, I think, 1:30, the agreement there is there's only 3 people that will be suspended.
Well, I had a look at I think the transcript of what I believe was that meeting. And my recollection is that when you read that transcript, when it comes to the question of who the people are who are going to be suspended, you seem to find different speakers talking about a different number of people. Some seem to talk about 3, others seem to talk about 4, which includes the financial director. But you come to a point, and it may be that is at the end of that meeting, where the issue arises again whether the financial director is to be included. And Mr. Zola Tsotsi, if I remember correctly, comes out quite clearly that no, the financial director is not included. My recollection is that is how that meeting ends.
That's correct, Chairperson.
My impression is that, nevertheless, at the P&G meeting later on, the name of the financial director seems to be included. Is that the same impression you have?
That's
as well?
exactly the same impression, Chairperson.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Select.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Then, Ms. Klein, you have, let me deal first with this aspect about the recording which you say is apparently incomplete. Now, this recording, you have had it all the time. We didn't know, you told us on your last appearance that you have it. There are minutes that have since been produced from that meeting of 11 March 2015. Some of those minutes of the various meetings were signed by Dr. Ngubane, we said, more than a year later, 18 November 2016.
Correct, Chairperson.
And you were still serving on the board at the time.
That is correct.
Those minutes would have been discussed before they are signed by the board.
Correct.
Did you at any stage point out to the chairperson at the time that, but we are missing something from these minutes which should have been captured?
Chairperson, no. And let me try and answer you this way. It was not until I was asked about the suspensions for preparation, for preparatory purposes of this committee or this inquiry, that one then started wanting to refresh your memory. And then you went to go and listen to recordings to make sure that your recollection is correct, because we are talking about 5 years ago. That's the first point. So to answer you, Chairperson, no, I did not point that out previously. The point that the minute was only signed a year later, I cannot talk to. What I do want to place on record, though, is the veracity of the minute as it stands was approved by all board members in a meeting of April of 2015. I cannot, Chairperson, explain to you how Dr. Ben only gets to sign it a year later.
Let me just make sure I understand that. Are you saying that when we see the minutes that Dr. Ngubane signed more than a year later, and there is more than one, I think, there are a few of those minutes.
Yes.
Are you saying that that doesn't necessarily mean that the board approved those minutes more than a year later? You say the board approved those minutes within a short space of time after the meeting concerned, but the chairperson, for whatever reason, signed them much later. Is that what you are saying?
Chairperson, that is correct.
Yes, and that holds in regard to all those minutes where Dr. Ngubane seems to have signed more than a year later.
From what I've heard from the Commission, Dr. Ngubane, because even in my own evidence, all of the minutes I've got is unsigned.
Yes.
What I do want to say to the Commission, however, is that it was not new in Eskom that minutes got signed so much later than it actually happened. In fact, Chairperson, when I got to a number of the meetings that I chaired, I was asked to sign minutes of 2014, which is of the previous board, and
How could you sign those?
I think, I want to place it on record so that I know you've got the company secretary coming later, and he can maybe help to enlighten us. Because the company secretary was there when the meeting of the 11th happened, and the company secretary was there when we, the board, ratified all of the minutes of the meetings that had happened in our time.
Yes.
So why Dr. Ngubane signed it a year or two later, I cannot talk.
Yes.
You'll have to ask Dr. Ngubane that,
Yes.
Chairperson.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Do you know whether before the board approved any of these minutes where there was a recording of the meeting, the proceedings of the meetings, whether they would have been assured that whoever prepared the minutes had listened to the recording and therefore what the minutes reflected what really had been discussed? Because when there's a recording, you have a benefit. You know, you don't have to rely on your notes. You don't have to rely on your memory. When you prepare the minutes, you can listen to the recording and make sure that the minutes you put together reflect in substance what was discussed. Do you know whether the board was told that with the minutes that it approved that had been done?
Chairperson, to the best of my knowledge, every single meeting was recorded. But I must also say, in the time at Eskom, there were discussions, which I know they'd actually asked for it not to be recorded. So, you know, so it's a bit difficult to say that it was all 100% recorded, number one. Number two, I've actually also tried to get access to the in-committee minutes, because that would give, you know, rise to a lot of the questions being asked. And I'm told there are no such minutes. So I can't conclusively say to you, Chairperson, that every single meeting was recorded. I think Mr. Phukubje would be the best person to answer that question for you, sir.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Klein, we then have these recordings. We've checked them with yourself, and we have, as you have, relied on them. Correct?
Correct, Chair.
Yes. To the extent that you say things are not there, but yet not raised, you haven't done anything about it, and that's where it is. That's what it is. So to the extent that you say the audio recording is missing something,
Yes.
which you didn't raise, there's nothing the Commission can do about it.
I totally agree with you, Chair.
So we move on from the meeting of the 11th.
What of course, anybody who was at such a meeting can say is, having listened to the recording and having looked at the minutes, I am able to say there are things which were discussed at that meeting which are not contained in the recording or which are not reflected in the minutes, and the reason why they are not reflected may well be because they were discussed before the recording started.
I agree with you,
Yes,
Chairperson.
yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Klein, perhaps I do not need to belabor the point because Mr. Tsotsi has said explicitly that what was presented to him in Durban with the President was that 3 executives should be suspended or step aside, and that is what he presented to the board. And I think what you're trying to answer, which it's not clear to me, is what is your answer to when was the FD, the financial director's name, added to the list?
I think if I look at, not I think, Chairperson, my version, which was the same version in Parliament as what it is here, is that it all happened at the same time.
And when you say it all happened, the names?
The names was
Yeah.
motivated, according to me, which is what I said in Parliament, and I say here again, by Mr. Tsotsi at the beginning of the meeting. Bearing in mind, that was with the benefit of having looked at the minutes and, acquainted myself at the time of Parliament with that. When asked the question by the Commission to go and look at the suspensions more specifically, because in Parliament I wasn't really focusing on the Commission, only on the suspensions. It was more about a whole range of other issues. I then went to go and listen to recordings, and it's at that point that I I started realizing that what was in the minutes, which was all four with Mr. Tsotsi, which, by the way, I remember specifically Mr. Tsotsi telling us, that the financial director was involved with some form of tender tampering. That stuck in my mind. But when I listen to the recording, it becomes clear that we would have heard it somewhere that she was involved with tender tampering, but at that stage, at the end of the meeting, which now ends at 12:30, which starts at 12, recording starts at 12:23, but ends at 1:30, the board took a decision that it was only 3. So to answer you, Chairperson, her name would have gone back onto the list, which it originally was, according to me, in the People and Governance meeting, which took place between, from what I can tell, 1:30 to 14:48, which is when the next meeting starts, where the chairperson then opens up with the fourth person's name is on the list.
Yeah, it's. I think when I read the transcript to which I referred earlier, there were things that seemed to be confusing to me with regard to Mr. Tsotsi, because I think there is somewhere where he speaks on the basis that the financial director is included, but there definitely is a place, I think, towards the end, where somebody raises the issue whether the financial director is included, and he specifically says, no, the financial director is not included. So it becomes confusing. But maybe that's the point where you say the board's decision at the end of that meeting was that it was 3 and not the financial director. Yes.
That is correct, Chair.
But then at the P&G meeting, I think that's what you are saying.
Yes.
Her name was then included.
Included.
Yes.
Included.
But you don't have a recollection, do you, as to who was the person who included her name for the first time at the P&G meeting?
And Chair, it was very interesting because when I started listening to everything again, some things then did crystallize, because I was asked at this commission the question before, and I think I even raised it with you. I said, there was a time when Dr. Ben was running in and out of the meeting on the phone.
Yes,
I think I even said to you, Chairperson, and I know this is not my job to do.
Yes, no.
But I said, I found it strange that Dr. Ben was running in and out and coming back and forth. And I think what Dr. Ben said was that he was on the phone with the minister. That happened in that P&G meeting.
Yes.
And I think it's at that point when that name went back on.
Yes.
What exactly the minister said to him or did not say, I cannot account for, you'll have to ask Dr. Ben.
Yes.
But it was at that stage.
Yes.
Remember the minister in the earlier meeting said the people who's responsible for.
Yes.
So what exactly was said between Dr. Ben and the minister, I don't know.
Yes.
But that was the point in P&G where the CFO's name went back onto the list.
Well, that's quite interesting. One, because as I recall, when the minister left the meeting she had with the board earlier on that day, she said she would be around if, as I understand the position, she meant if board members want to clarify something with her, she's not going to go far, she'll be around or something like that. I think that's what I saw. That's one point. Second point, it's interesting because Mr. Tsotsi, if I recall correctly, testified that Dr. Ngubane told him that it was the minister who said the financial director must be included as well. Also, Mr. Baloyi gave evidence yesterday, and part of his evidence was that Dr. Ngubane was frequently on the phone and he was phoning the presidency. I think he said that, for example, in relation to people who were going to act in the positions of the executives who were to be suspended, that his understanding was that Dr. Ngubane was getting the names from the presidency. Now, of course, it could be the presidency, could have been phoning the presidency at some stage, it could have been phoning the minister at some stage. We don't know. But what you do say, what you do confirm is that Dr. Ngubane, during, I think, the PNG meeting, was coming in and out of the meeting, making calls, as you understood it, to the minister. Is that right?
That is correct, Chair.
Yes.
I can't really talk to the presidency because, I mean,
Yes,
I don't know
but
who
the minister, that was your understanding.
that was my understanding.
Yes, yeah.
And I think for me it would have lined up with what was said previously in our earlier meeting with the minister.
Yes, okay, all right. Of course, maybe I could raise this with you, which maybe I should have raised with other witnesses before, because you just touched on there having been an allegation that the financial director had tampered or interfered or met with some service providers about tenders or whatever. That in the meetings of that day, the 11th, one finds in the minutes or the transcripts that somewhere there were discussions about alleged wrongdoing on the part of the executives who were sought to be suspended. And yet, at the Durban meeting which Mr. Tsotsi attended, it was made clear that the suspension of the executive directors was not going to be based on any wrongdoing. That's number one. Number two, at the meeting or meetings of the 11th of March, also ultimately the board seems to have said we are not alleging any wrongdoing on the part of the executives, and yet it seems that the basis, the reason that may have been advanced as to why the financial director must be included was this allegation of wrongdoing about tenders and service providers. You understand that? One would have thought that from the beginning it would have been said, because we are not basing these suspensions on wrongdoing, please don't tell us about any wrongdoing. That's irrelevant. Did you want to say anything?
Chairperson, I guess where I'm struggling with the sequence of events is that my recollection or understanding, certainly of also now following the commission with great interest on who's saying what, is that Mr. Nick Linnell, who was obviously briefed by whoever in Durban, actually had charges. So it wasn't a case of, let's just ask them to step aside. Nick Linnell came to the meeting, which he testified to, with actual charges of wrongdoing. So when you say that in Durban, the decision was not to charge, that's not congruent with what Nick Linnell said. Nick Linnell said he came with the charges. And the question would have to be, where did those charges come from? I mean, that would be my question.
No, I understand what you're saying. My recollection is quite clear that at the Durban meeting, Mr. Tsotsi has said, and I suspect that Mr. Linnell may have said the same thing too, but I'm much more clearer about Mr. Tsotsi's evidence, that when the Durban meeting discussed the suspensions, Mr. Tsotsi was opposed to the suspensions. But one of the main reason that was advanced to address his concern was that, no. These suspensions should not be a problem, because these executives will be told that there are no allegations of wrongdoing on their part. That certainly was Mr. Tsotsi's evidence. I think you are right in saying at the meeting of the 11th March, the documents that Mr. Linnell may have prepared, which we have here, some of them may be including allegations of wrongdoing against some of the against the executives. But I don't remember that in his evidence about the Durban meeting, I don't remember that he said that at the Durban meeting there was a discussion of allegations of wrongdoing. Maybe there were, but what I think certainly Mr. Tsotsi said was, it was said that the executives should not have a problem with suspension because it's not going to be based on wrongdoing. But as I say, we know that at one or more of the meetings of the 11th of March, there were discussions of allegations of wrongdoing, and I think some of the documents prepared by Mr. Linnell do refer to allegations of wrongdoing. And of course, we know that ultimately the board did say the suspensions would not be based on any allegations of wrongdoing. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Selega, you might be able
Yes,
to,
no, I wanted to assist
to throw light here.
the chairperson there, because in his affidavit, Mr. Nick Linnell refers to Jabu Maswanganyi, who gives him documents, but he says these were mainly for unverified sources and so on. But then specifically in regard to the executives, and I want that paragraph, chairperson, he says the information was unverified and there was not going to be allegations of wrongdoing against them. They were going to step aside in order not to interfere with the inquiry, and they were going to be cancelled about that. But he doesn't know whether they were cancelled about that. So that's his...
But am I right about saying that some of the documents that he prepared for the meeting of the 11th, maybe documents that the memorandum maybe is one of them, that it does include, some of them do include allegations of wrongdoing.
He did prepare a document that
Yes.
contained some allegations.
Yes, we just don't know why he would have included those allegations in circumstances where, to his knowledge, the suspensions were not supposed to be based on any wrongdoing.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, we might have to ask him, even if he sends an affidavit, to deal with that.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
And Chair, the other point is this. Ms. Klein, Mr. Baloyi in his affidavit, in fact says that you were the one who suggested that the FD be included on the list. He says, during Mr. Tsotti's presentation, and I will go to that, the indication was that only 3 executives would be suspended, namely Mr. Tsidiso Matona, then Marukane, and Mr. Malesela Phukubje. Ms. Tsulofelo Molefe, the finance director, was not included from the start. However, during the People and Governance meeting on 11 March 2015, Ms. Venete Klein said that Molefe should also be suspended. Ms. Klein mentioned that there were many issues with the finance department and that there was enough reasons to suspend Ms. Molefe.
Chairperson, I categorically deny that. In fact, to go to for 2 reasons. Norman Baloyi was a member of Audit and Risk. He was not a member of People and Governance. So I don't know how he would have heard me say that. That's the first thing. In the recordings of the debate on the whole thing around should the FD go or should the FD not be suspended, I am not the person who raises the issue about many problems in the finance department. I've actually provided the commission with the names of the people who were speaking there. The one thing I was consistent about, and I said it here before, the finance director had shared with us earlier on that morning that we were running a company of 30 million rand an hour. So I was always very cognizant that whatever decisions this board makes, we must do it and move on it. But that I said that the CFO must be included, I categorically deny.
Thank you, Chair. May I go to the transcript,
Please do.
Ms. Klein, because I know that you have the recordings. 2 things arise from what you're saying. Number 1 is that Mr. Norman Baloyi was not a member of P&G.
Correct.
Mr. Norman Baloyi says, and the other witnesses have also said, he was present at the meeting of 11 March 2015, P&G meeting. He was present, he's not a member.
Maybe before you answer that, I was going to say either one of the witnesses or I may have picked up in minutes or transcript, somewhere I think I read something along the lines that board members who may not necessarily have been members of the P&G were entitled to be present at this particular P&G meeting. Now, maybe it's not this particular, it may be at any P&G meeting. If they want to attend, they are free to attend. I don't know, but I think I read somewhere, or I heard one of the witnesses say something along the lines that at that P&G meeting, members of the board who may not have been members of that committee were allowed or were entitled to go and sit and sit there. I don't know whether that meant they could participate or they could be observers. I don't know whether it meant they could vote, but I read something along those lines, or I heard somebody say that. You might be able to enlighten me.
I totally agree, Chair, but I think let Mr. Seleka ask the question, because then it's probably better to answer it then.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. Do you say you agree with the chairperson?
I agree with the chairperson.
And I wanted to add to the chairpersons that the minute of the P&G of the 11th of March does reflect Mr. Baloyi as present. It's Mr. Koza, the chairman, Ms. Karim, Ms. Mabude, Dr. Naidu, Ms. Naidu, Mr. Baloyi, Mr. Tsotsi, Ms. Klein. Present at the PNG.
May I ask a question, Chair, just for clarity? Chairperson, are we referring to the meeting that starts at 14:48? Is that what you are referring to there, Chairperson?
The minute of the People and Governance Committee, 11 March 2015, at 14:58.
All right.
I can give you the page reference.
No. I want to, I think there's two versions here, and please, I don't want to waste time.
Yes.
The first meeting, the first board meeting, started at 9 o'clock in the morning. The minister comes in. The rest of the board meeting starts at 12 o'clock and ends at 1:30. At that stage, Chairperson, there were 3 people to be suspended. The meeting of 14:48, Chairperson, even though it is called a People and Governance meeting, if you read the first few lines, it is a full board meeting. It's not a People and Governance meeting. The PNG, where this discussion was happening, and Dr. Ngubani was running in and out, would have happened between 1:30 and the 14:48 meeting, which is when Nick Linnell gets introduced to us.
And that's a PNG meeting.
That then becomes a full board meeting. The PNG and the Audit and Risk meeting happened between 1:30 and 14:48.
Didn't you eat lunch on that day?
Sorry, say that again,
Did you
sir?
not, did the board members not eat lunch on that day? I'm simply asking because
Yeah.
you're talking about finishing the board meeting at 1:30, but then another meeting starting.
At 2:45.
Yes, but I heard Mr. Tsotsi also say after the board meeting that happened after the minister had left, and before the PNG meeting started, he went for lunch. When he came back from lunch, he said the PNG meeting had been running for about 10 minutes, so he came in when it had been going on for about 10 minutes. That's when he says he found the meeting discussing names of people who were going to act in the positions of the executives and raised the issue of how can you people be discussing these names because you don't know these people.
Yes.
That's what.
Yes.
So I'm wondering whether, in terms of the timing, there wasn't time allowed for the board members to go and have lunch and then come back.
Chairperson, I can only imagine that there would have been such a lunch break, and I'm sure that others can give you more detail on it. But remember, the question being asked is, at 1:30, there were 3 names. At 10 to 3, you now have 4 names. Something happened in between. And the something that happened at a PNG meeting, which was a breakaway session between those 2 meetings.
So you locate the PNG meeting at 1:30 to something to 3.
Somewhere in between that, something happened, which is the meeting where Dr. Benga runs in and out. This meeting, the one that starts at 14:48, is not the one where Dr. Ben runs in and out. We would have picked that up in the transcripts.
Yes.
That Dr. Ben's coming in with such a name or such a name. Nowhere in the transcripts does that come through.
Okay, let's just see. So 9 o'clock, it's a board meeting.
Correct, sir.
Somewhere after that, while that board meeting is going on, the minister arrives.
Correct.
And then the minister has a meeting with the board.
That's right, sir.
And at a certain stage, the minister leaves.
Yes.
And then the board continues with its meeting.
That is
that
correct.
right?
That is correct.
I think that's about 12 o'clock.
From 12 to 1:30.
From 12 to 1:30.
Yes.
That's a full board meeting.
That's correct.
But on what you are saying is that from 1:30 up to what time?
20, I think it's
Something to 3.
14:48 or 14:58,
Yeah, okay, just before 3.
just before 3.
Yeah, you say there was a P&G meeting during that time.
Yes.
Was that the only meeting that was going on at the time, or could that meeting have been going on in parallel with another board meeting, which would be without the P&G members?
Yeah. Chairperson, my recollection is that there was a discussion that took place after that 3 o'clock, not the 3 o'clock, the 1:30 meeting.
Yes.
That is where the 3 became 4. It was in that meeting that the 3 became 4.
Yes.
Because at the beginning of the meeting, which is known as the P&G meeting, but when you go and you look at the actual, the chairperson's talking about, it's a full board meeting at this stage.
Yeah, what I'm trying to understand is this. You see, when I read something somewhere suggesting that at the P&G meeting, it was said that the chairperson of the board must chair the P&G meeting.
Yes.
You remember something
I
like
remember
that?
that as well,
Yes, yes.
Chairperson.
So I then asked the question, was the P&G meeting chaired by the chair of the board as opposed to by the chair of the P&G meeting? What is your recollection?
I recollect that as well. What I'm suggesting is if you listen to the transcripts, because somewhere at the beginning of the transcripts, it starts talking about this being a full board meeting.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of it, when the executives get suspended, basically get called in, that is where the aid memoir of Nick Linnell, which is where, Mr. Tsotsi, you must now take over and run P&G yourself. That is where that comes in.
Yeah. Okay, we might never be able to get all the details, but I think we will just focus on the important issues.
Yes,
On Ms. Klein's evidence, the name of the names at the end of the board meeting that ended at 1:30, on her version, at that stage, the board was talking only about 3 executives being suspended, and that list did not include the financial director.
Yes.
What she does say is that during the P&G meeting, which she says started at 1:30 and went up to about 2 minutes to 3, that is the meeting where the financial director's name was added, and ultimately the suspension involved all 4 executives. And she says it was during that meeting, which started at 1:30 and went up to 2:55, it was during that meeting that Dr. Ngubane was moving in and out of the meeting, phoning, as she understood, the minister about certain matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct, Chair. And that version, Chair, has to be contrasted with what Mr. Baloyi says and with what we see from the transcript. Because Mr. Baloyi says you added or suggested that the FD also be suspended.
Okay. Are you going to take me to the transcript where that is?
Yes, and he says, because you were saying he's not a member of the P&G, but I don't think you were saying he was not present at the P&G meeting.
Chairperson, remember we're talking about 2 different meetings here. What you are referring to is the meeting of 14:48 where Mr. Baloyi is present. What I'm talking about is what happened in between.
From 1:30
That's
2 minutes
what
to
I'm
3.
talking about. Remember the question was, when was the FD's name put on? That was the question, Chairperson. When we stopped the meeting at 1:30, the chair name wasn't on. When we come back at 14:48, the first couple of minutes, somebody asked the question about, is it 3 or is it 4? And you could hear Mr. Zola Tsotsi saying at that stage, it is 4.
Yeah, but it will help Ms. Klein if we stick to the documentation, because that question was asked by Dr. Nkubani, and Mr. Tsotsi said it is 3 to be suspended. The reference bundle chairperson deals with that, and Ms. Klein, I'm expecting you to know this because you were in that meeting.
Which one is that meeting? Because I think that's part of what she is emphasizing.
Yes.
Are you able to tell that's a meeting that started when?
I'm emphasizing the point Ms. Klein is saying. A question is asked, how many are going to be suspended? And that's the question here. The question is, sorry, Chair, somebody's asking, and that's Dr. Nkubani according to the transcript. I just want to know, just last minute in this process, then it becomes indistinct. The chairperson then says, the CE, the head of group capital, and the head of commercial are the 3 individuals we are going to ask to step aside. Then Mr. Baloyi says, oh, because I thought maybe then the CE and the CFO are excluded. Mr. Tsotsi says, no, the CE is not excluded. The CFO is excluded. That's what we have decided.
Now, if you look at the top of those minutes, what time do they say that meeting started?
This,
Because
this
they normally
chair-
write what time
Yes.
the meeting was.
the time stamp on this. Okay, the transcript doesn't indicate
Oh, it is the
the
transcript.
time stamp. This is the transcript.
Oh, okay.
But it is the board in committee meeting
Yes,
immediately after the meeting with the minister.
yes, yes.
It is prior to the PNG meeting, Chair. Let me, before the Chair.
Oh, well, if you say it is prior to the PNG meeting,
Yes.
that might be in line with my impression, but I'm not feeling very certain that I'm right. But I have an impression that at the end of the board meeting that started after the minister had left, that there is that issue arises, and that Mr. Tsotsi insists that the financial director is not involved. I have that impression. I think
That's
Ms.
correct.
This is the one,
Ms.
Chair.
Klein, Ms.
That's the
Klein
one.
confirms.
Yes, this is exactly where I am.
Okay, then in that event, what that transcript says is in line with what Ms. Klein is saying, because she does say at the end of the board meeting that ended at 1:30 on her version, which is the board meeting that started, I think, at 12 after the minister had left. She says the decision of the board was that it was 3 executives. So
Yes.
that's in line with what she says.
Correct, Chair.
And then what she does, she says, then there was a meeting that started at 1:30 and ended at something to 3. And she says that was a P&G meeting. And she says it is during that meeting, it is at that meeting that the financial director's name was added. And she says she can't remember who added the financial director's name, but she does say Dr. Ben Ngubane during that meeting was going in and out making phone calls to, on her understanding, the minister. And when one looks at that, one must remember what Mr. Tsotsi said. If my recollection is correct, Mr. Tsotsi's evidence was that Dr. Ngubane told him when he was saying, but the financial director should not be included, he says, Dr. Ngubane said, the minister said this name, the name of the financial director must be included.
Correct.
So you have a situation where on the transcript which you have read and on Ms. Klein's evidence,
Yes, Chair.
at the end of the board meeting that ended at 1:30, only 3 names were agreed, and they did not include the financial director. And then you have this meeting where I think Mr. Tsozi says, Dr. Ngubane said it's the minister who wanted the financial director to be included. And you have Ms. Klein saying during that meeting, Dr. Ngubane was in and out of the meeting phoning on her understanding the minister.
Yes.
At least I think that part. Of course, you do
Yes.
you have put to Ms. Klein, Mr. Baloyi's evidence
Yes.
that Ms. Klein is the one who put up the financial director's
Correct.
name. And of course, she has categorically said, no, that is not so. But that's where we are.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
And Ms. Klein, on that point, because I was going to go to the point of the PNG, but let me address that point. Because even in the board-in committee, you are heard supporting, not even supporting, motivating for the suspension of the FD. You motivate for the suspension of the FD along the lines which Mr. Baloyi is saying, that you were involved in the finances with the subcommittees, you know there are problems with finances, the FD should also be part of it.
Chairperson, I'm going to have to ask that you please point that out to me, because when
Okay.
I read the transcripts,
Yes, no, that's
when
fair
I read the
enough.
transcripts, that was not me, that was Varoshni Naidu who said that. And in
that's-
fact, I provided the commission
Yeah.
with the names of the different voices.
No, that's fair enough. But this is what I want you to think about. I mean, it may be that the position is that, as you categorically deny, that did not happen, okay? But you said earlier on that during the board meeting, I don't know whether it was the one before the minister came, the names were not mentioned, but the areas were discussed. It seems to me that
That
what
is
you
right.
were saying was a principle was established.
Yes.
And the principle was, if your area, your portfolio is going to be investigated, you should step aside.
That is right.
Now, if that is so, if that is true, and if your understanding was that the finance portfolio was one of the areas to be investigated, one could understand if later on you would say, but why leave out the FD? Because her area is included, it will be affected. You understand what I mean? But it may be that that did not happen, and if it did not happen, it did not happen.
Yes.
So, but I was just saying, to the extent that a principle was established, you may have understood the finance department to be affected, and therefore, in terms of that principle, you may have expected that she would be suspended as well. But let's deal with it. Are you able to refer her to the?
The exact wording, because I
Relevant
remember on
parts.
listening to it and sending through the names to the commission, the person who said that I've worked on on numerous committees and the finances were not in order was Ms. Varoshni Naidu. That was not me. What I did say, Chairperson, and I said it before, is that what the finance person or finance
The
head had
FD,
said,
yeah.
the FD had said, she gave us the numbers, she said they were running short. So I wasn't there defending her, like, for example, I think it was Mark Paminsky who was very vocal about, but you can't let the FD go because he spoke about stuff about, I think,
The markets.
downgrading,
Yeah.
all of that. But the piece about me saying that I've sit on various committees and the financials were not in order, the committee or the commission asked me to re-listen to it and give them the names. And I gave them the names, and that comment came from Varashni Naidu, not me.
Okay, maybe
Maybe
it's
Mr.
it's
Seleka
time
can
for
give it to me.
a short break. That might help to find the
Yeah.
place.
That's fine.
But if when we come back, you haven't found it, this hasn't been resolved, we can continue
Yes,
with
Chair.
other questions while your junior is
Yeah.
looking, and then we can revisit it later.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll take the tea adjournment and resume at 25 to 12.
Thank you.
We adjourn. Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chair.
We have spent quite some time on some of these matters, but I think it was important to deal with certain issues.
Yes, Chair.
But I think if you have been able to find the relevant parts of the transcript that Ms. Klein wanted to be pointed out to her, do that. If not, let's continue while your junior is looking for those parts of the transcript, and then we can go back to that issue later.
Ms. Klein, I can give you the reference, Chairperson, on this very specific issue, because Ms. Klein refers to one incident where Ms. Naidu is talking, and there's one aspect where you are also talking.
Has she had a chance to look at that one or not yet?
I've looked at both of them, the transcript.
Yeah, no, I mean, has she, Ms. Klein, had a chance to
Oh, no.
refresh her memory on that part there where you say she's talking?
No, not yet. I didn't show it
Chairperson,
to you.
maybe if you can just read it. And then
Yeah,
I
if you can read it to
And then
her.
we'll see if I need to
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
But if it's in the bundle that is before her, you can tell her what page, while you read, she can look
It's
as
in
well.
the reference bundle.
Okay, maybe just read it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Klein, Ms. Mabude talks about what the minister said, just to give you context. Thanks, Chair. I think the minister has indicated a whole lot of issues that needs to be looked at. And in her speech, if you noted what she was saying, it is the basis for the terms of reference. So if we can use that speech as a way of putting the terms of reference from that speech. Then she carries on.
Sorry, is that Ms. Mabude, Chair, or is that me?
No, Ms. Mabude.
Okay,
I'm just
okay.
giving you
Okay, all right, right.
the pretext to get to the context.
Yes, but let's have Ms. Klein have the reference bundle in front of her as well.
Okay, the reference bundle.
That will give her the
Thank you,
advantage, the
Chairperson.
benefit.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Chair. I beg your pardon, Ms. Klein. That's on page 356. Page 356. Against line 20 on that page, I was reading from there, Ms. Klein.
Yes, sir.
And from that speech, it was indicated to me, indicated the critical sections that needs to be looked at. And in looking at those critical sections, just keep the leader in each section from what she was saying and so forth. Then you turn the page to page 358. The chairperson speaks. Okay.
You are referring to the red numbers now on this bundle as well.
No, the
Black numbers.
black numbers, chairperson. Thank you for
Okay, so
reminding
what
me.
page?
Page 358.
358.
358, Chair. I'm now automatically used to the black when I see them, Chair.
Sorry, Chairperson, mine is still the red numbers, huh? At the top.
No, the black one in this one. In this reference, at the top left. Yes,
Okay,
All right,
358,
thank you.
black numbers, yes, I've got that.
yes. Then the chairperson, after Ms. Mabude has spoken, says, okay, I think based on what you are saying, Chwaita, that Ms. Mabude, there are 4 areas that the minister has spoken about. She spoke about maintenance, and that is engineering. Maintenance is driven by engineering. She spoke about procurement, and that is commercial. And she spoke about new build program, that's capital and technology. And she spoke about finance. So Ms. Tutsi indicates that the minister already has referred to 4 areas.
Yes.
And then Ms. Naidu speaks at the bottom of, after the chairperson has spoken, the Mr. Chair, she also spoke about the fact that the load shedding.
Yes.
But you go to the next page. Mr. Tsotsi then says, no, That's once again, don't forget load shedding is a consequence of maintenance and lack thereof. So it is still engineering, it's not generations. Says, okay. Then you come in, Ms. Klein, chairperson, look, I think as the board we've been grappling with a whole lot of issues which, as she's correctly pointed out, now Ms. Klein, bear in mind, what I'm saying is the motivation you're making for the FD. She was concerned, we are worrying ourselves about the rats and mice and burning platforms not being attacked, but I think as a board, this is going to be one time when we must step up the plate and must make hard calls because we've been saying we've been disengaged, now we are engaged. Now the real question becomes, do we now want to now delay this by going into subcommittees, work before we make hard calls? Sitting here today and knowing, and it doesn't have to be proven or evidential proof. The fact that our chairman tells us, unless we believe he's lying, we cannot ignore what is being put on the table. I think this is where we need to make hard calls, with a parallel process of finding the evidence on what is being, what's happening. But I get a bit scared if we want to now palm off the subcommittees, number one, and number two, people are going to be treated like criminals. You know what, guys, today, and in the business world, public and private sector, people are being set aside, which is why that word is quite good. It's not suspended, but it's set aside while something bigger happens. This is not about you or me. This is about the entire country. And I think this is a watershed moment for us as a board, but for the country. So if somebody can make a hard call to show we will leave no stone unturned, to see if we can turn this thing around, and we can make a mistake, we are going to make some mistakes as we go, but don't forget this board has been seen, or I certainly feel like a sitting duck from the 10th or 12th of December. I've said it a number of times. Now this is one thing I've got to challenge myself and say, given what I now know, I'm still going to do that. So that's the one part of the motivation for the suspensions, Ms. Klein.
Yes.
I will then specifically refer you to.
Well, what you read, Mr. Seleka,
Yes, Chair.
unless I'm missing something, might, what you read, which you said is attributed to Ms. Klein, might not necessarily relate to the financial director. It might be a call upon members of the board or P&G, whoever we are dealing with here, to say, look, we have got to make hard decisions here, and we must step up and make those decisions without necessarily, and I may have missed some things, without necessarily saying I'm motivating for the inclusion of the financial director. I may have missed something. I'm just saying
Yes.
That's the impression I got.
Yes. No, correct, Chair. Specifically here, it's the motivation for what the chairperson has said.
Yes.
Ms. Mabude, what I understand you to be saying is that the minister has identified 4 areas
Yes.
for suspension.
Yes.
And Ms. Klein, in this regard, is saying,
He's saying let's
yes,
go along.
let's do it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Ms. Klein, what do you say about that
I
interpretation?
absolutely support that, Chair.
Sorry?
I absolutely support that.
That is what, yes.
That was exactly what I was saying. That
Okay.
we can't be busy with rats and mice. There's a bigger issue here. We've not had information before. Now we do. Now, can we please just get on with the job of doing it? But I thought, maybe, Chairperson, there's another reference, because if you can just show me that other one where we talk about, I've dealt with the FD before, and she is not
That's the
That's
one
right.
that you could not remember.
That's the one that I remember was, but if you
Yeah.
could take us to there, it would help us, please.
Yes, but I think just to
Yes.
to make sure we are on the same page, your response, your reaction to what Mr. Seleka has read as attributed to you is, yes, that is what you said.
That is
number
correct,
one.
sir. Yes.
Number two, yes, you were supporting the suspensions that were being discussed.
Yes.
And those suspensions included the FD.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
At that stage, that's what I was saying.
Yes, okay, all right.
I haven't checked the one, Ms. Klein, you want now.
No, but we can do that later.
But we can do that later,
I'm
yes.
comfortable with that, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, no, that's fine.
Yes, Chair. Can I move on, Chair?
Yes, please, yes.
Ms. Klein, the,
Of course, maybe I should not say of course. This does not affect the answer you gave earlier on of categorically denying Mr. Baloi's evidence that you came up with the name of the FD.
No, that doesn't address it at all.
That answer stands.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, absolutely, Chairperson.
okay.
because it seems from what Ms. Mabuda is saying, which Mr. Tsotsi then reiterates, that the minister was the one who indicated 4 areas.
Yes.
So, is it also your recollection, Ms. Klein, that the minister indicated 4 areas or portfolios?
I remember the minister's words being, I remember with the last time we spoke about it, I couldn't recollect it clearly, but I went back and rethought a whole lot of things. The minister said that the people heading the areas considered to be the problem areas, it would be best to get them to step aside.
Yes.
That's how
Yes.
I remember it.
Yeah.
That is why when we got into the board meeting after the in-committee meeting, it was the
Yes.
toing and froing. Is the FD in, isn't she? But the minister, I don't think, said 4. If I remember correctly, she said the people responsible for the areas that the board considered to be problematic areas. If I remember correctly, I speak under correction there, Chair.
You see, it may be that this is what happened. We certainly know that at the Durban meeting, the financial director was not included.
Right.
And the finance portfolio, I think, was not included. That we know. We also know that ultimately 4 and not 3 executives were suspended, and they included the financial director. So it's a question of at what stage the financial director was included. And part of what you have said this morning is when the minister was speaking to the board on the 11th, she laid down a principle.
Yes.
And the principle was that she thought that executives who were leading portfolios that would be investigated should step aside or should be suspended, or she would leave it to the board, but she would understand if they were suspended or something like that. Now, if that is so, and if her speech or what she said to the board at that time included the finance department, it would be logical if at the PNG meeting the question arose whether the FD should be included among the executives to be suspended. It would be logical or understandable if somebody from within the committee, and this time maybe Dr. Ngubane, called the minister to say, you know, Minister, there is an issue about whether the FD should be included or not, you know, and you said that portfolios that are affected, people who lead them, executives who lead them, maybe should be suspended. Did you mean that the FD should also be suspended? And therefore, if Dr. Ngubane came back to the meeting and said, no, we must include the FD, one would understand. If Mr. Tsotsi asked him, but where are you coming with this name from? Because we always spoke about 3, then he would answer, the minister said she must be included. So it would fall in place logically if that because she seems to have laid a principle. And if later on she was asked, in terms of this principle you laid when you talked to us, should the FD be included? Yes. And it seems that logically she would say, apply that principle, and if you apply it, the FD gets included.
I agree, Chairperson, and I think the only people who can answer that would be Dr. Ngubane,
yes,
or Minister, because,
yeah,
like I said, you know, that was the level of deliberation.
Yes,
the meeting closed with 3,
yeah,
and the next one opened with 4.
Yeah.
So somewhere in between there.
Yes.
Maybe the calls, maybe, like you
Yes.
correctly point out, Minister was in the building. I don't quite know how that worked.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I remember a meeting where Dr. Ngubane was running in and out. And when looking at the transcripts of the 1448 meeting, I couldn't find where he was running in and out and coming with names. So that's what led me to believe,
Yes.
Advocate Seleka, that that must have happened in between those 2.
Yes.
In fact, in the transcripts of the 12, of the meeting that ends at 1, it's actually, Advocate, when you look at it, Chairperson, when you look at it, we say there, we're now going to break into the meeting, which I would assume would have been that smaller meeting where this was going on. But
Okay.
I think that needs to be verified with the likes of Dr. Ngubane,
Yeah.
and the Minister. I can't say anything more than that.
Okay.
Chair, your summation seems to bear concurrence with the documentation, because Dr. Ngubane says, when the minister arrives, although the minister did not direct the board to suspend the 4 executives, now, he specifically says the 4, and we've read the transcript saying the minister has identified 4 areas. She raised concerns of her own against them, the executives. The concerns related to the war room, which she suggested complainant was not receiving consistent information from management, and therefore it could not develop strategies to turn around Eskom and stop load shedding. The minister felt that the presence of the 4 executives might hinder the investigation. Now, that's Dr. Ngubane.
Yeah, so based on what Dr. Ngubane says, the minister spoke about 4 executives.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
So then you find that latter part you refer to, Chair, in Mr. Tsotsi's affidavit,
Yes.
where he says about the FD,
Yes.
that the FD was not to be included, but then Dr. Ngubane phoned the minister,
Yes.
and when he came back, he said, yes, the FD, the minister says the FD must be included.
Yes. Yes.
And that's at a PNG meeting.
Yes.
Because when you look at the PNG meeting, Mr. Tsotsi introduces Mr. Linnell. And he says to him, now the board has made some significant decisions. And the decisions the board has made in respect of the investigation are that, 1, the investigation will proceed as soon as possible. Number 2, those executives who are directly involved with the areas where the investigation will focus will be suspended. And he says, and these are 4 areas. This is first and foremost chief executive, then it is the executive for group capital, the executive for commercial, and the executive for finance. And the reason for that is because it is important that the ability to carry out the investigation is not compromised. Then somebody asked, sorry, Chair, is the executive for finance included as well? Mr. Chair, then, oh yes, 4. And that the work that needs to be done in respect of the investigation must not be compromised. He carries on, must not be compromised by the presence of these particular executives. One of the 2 that from the work you have done, the committee would like to know and needs to be updated in terms of the operational charges that are on the table in respect of the executives, and probably exclude the FD because you were not briefed on the FD. Now he's addressing Mr. Linnell, as far as I know. But certainly on the other 3 executives, maybe you want to take the committee through that. And also the processes that need to come into play for this to be different, to be effected, which include managing the media, the public perceptions, and all of this. Nick, should we just talk about these issues then, how you see the process going forward? And so what the chair is saying, the instruction to Mr. or the request to him specifically was from Durban, was in regard to the 3 executives, and that seems to have turned after the minister arrived, or as Mr. Klein, in between the meetings.
Can I just add, Chairperson, that voice that you heard is Malesela Phukubje. You
Is
can
that-
just,
oh,
yeah.
okay.
So, you know what, I would actually like us, I think, Chairperson, you asked me to put names next to unidentified voices. So if you could maybe just.
Can we do that exercise?
If you can, because it was sent, I hope my councillor sent it through to you, because it took me a lot of time to work through it. So.
Yes.
Yes.
But that
so-
was Malesela. So once again, I think what that then also shows us, Malesela was part of the first meeting.
Yes.
Which ended at a certain time. Here we go into a second meeting, whether we call it now PNG, we can have a difference of opinion about what it's called based on different things. But here is the company secretary asking you, so now it's gone from 3 to 4 now. So something happened in between that time, and I think you should ask the people concerned how that happened.
Okay, no, that's fine. But also it's important to make sure that we know exactly who is speaking
Yes.
in the
Correct,
different parts of the transcript so that we don't wrongly attribute something to somebody
Indeed.
who didn't say those things.
Indeed, Chair.
Okay.
Yes. We have made that arrangement with some of the witnesses to identify who's speaking at any given point. Chair, before that, you'll see the lunchtime being referred to, but your recollection is correct because they do take a break, and Ms. Mabude says audit and risk will meet before lunch. Mr. Tsotsi says, well, we will meet after lunch. And Mr. Baloyi says, sorry, Chair, let risk meet first, that is before lunch, and then we will meet up with risk once we get their input. And this is the debate about do we meet before lunch or after lunch.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Klein, let's move on quickly because we spent too much time there. The suspension of the FD and especially the 3 other executives was then done. Well, we can include Mr. Koko, but the other 2 executives write to the board and they engage with the board. They're seeking answers from the board about the actual reasons why they are suspended, because they see in the public media different reasons are advanced as opposed to what they were given. We've gone through that and we came to the meeting where there was a meeting you attended where they talked about letters from the executives. You can recall that?
Just help me, Chair, please,
Okay.
what are we talking about?
Okay,
Just remember, Mr. Selega, not to bother to go over the same thing that we
Okay.
went over.
Thank you, Chair.
Let's focus on things that were not covered But obviously, if there's something we covered where you have remembered some issue that you need to raise, you may raise it.
Yes. They will find the minutes of that meeting.
No problem, Chair.
I remember
No
referring
problem,
to.
that's okay.
Yeah. But Ms. Tsulufelo Molefe has indicated that you were actively involved in the settlement discussions or exit negotiations with her.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah. Because in your affidavit, you appeared not to be knowing how her situation was handled.
Sorry, that was the indication that I gave, Chairperson, but as Chairperson of P&G, I can actually take you to a minute where, as the board, we kept on getting requests, my understanding, from different executives wanting to exit. That was my understanding. In a board meeting in April, if my memory serves me well, it then says Romeo Khumalo can continue to engage with the CEO, who was at that stage, I think he'd already been to the Labour Court, and any further settlements or any people who want to still leave must contact Dr. Ben directly. It's interesting what the last sentence is. Mrs. Klein may also be part of the delegation. What was left out of that was that, and I'm not trying to say I wasn't part of it because I was part of it, but Chairperson, I had to fight as Chairperson of People and Governance, which I was at that stage, to be part of the discussions with the people very simply because I needed to make sure the people were fairly handled and treated. So to go back to that point, I'm not sure if that's the point you were making, Chairperson, but I just wanted to indicate I definitely was part. So if I omitted to answer it that way, then that was an oversight. But that I was part of it, I definitely was part of the exit discussions for Tsulufelo, as well as for Koko, which I'm sure we'll get to later, as well as for Mr. Matona. Yeah. Dan Marokane, I think, had already preceded that, so I wasn't part of that.
No problem on that. Let me tell you, because Ms. Tsulufelo has testified that when she was met by you and the delegation on the 4th of May.
Yes.
The delegation said to her, she's been writing letters to the board asking to exit. And she said she categorically denied that. She said, my letters were not about me wishing to exit. It was about me seeking information from the board. Do you recall that?
Let me just go back. Sorry, Chairperson, let me just understand. Are you saying that I said?
No.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get the question.
The delegation
Yes.
said to her, you have been writing letters to the board seeking to exit.
Okay.
She said she denied that. Her letters were not about her wishing to exit. It was about her seeking information from the board about the terms of reference and the actual reasons for a suspension. And there was an issue about an insurance for directors.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got to agree with her, Chairperson, because after the last time that I was here,
maybe
I have to agree with.
I think there's a part which Mr. Selega left, maybe he was going to deal with later on, and I hope I'm not confusing the different executives. Okay. But I thought I think she said Mr. Romeo Khumalo was the one speaking in that meeting. And she says, despite the fact that she told the delegation and told Mr. Khumalo that she had not written to the board wanting to leave, Mr. Khumalo followed up with a suggestion along the lines that the investigation or the inquiry may still take quite long. Maybe we should talk about a separation package anyway. That's what Ms. Mlefe said, the gist of it. That's what she added. Does that,
That does sound correct, Chairperson.
that's your recollection as well?
That's my recollection of certainly of what she said, because I've read
Yes.
through her letters as well, so I have to agree with that.
Yes, and do you have a recollection of Mr. Khumalo having responded along the same lines that she says, or do you have no recollection of that?
Chairperson, I can't remember exactly what was said, but I do know that Mr. Khumalo, you see, my understanding was prior to that meeting, there had been engagements between people talking to people, which is why the board had ultimately then agreed that Mr. Khumalo continues to talk to, I think it was Sedisa Matona, and that then there was a subcommittee formed because people were getting, apparently calls were coming in. I was led to believe that people were calling in because they were wanting to go. That was my understanding. So, but when I went back to reread, particularly to Lufelo's affidavit, not affidavit, the letters that she'd been writing, it was more questioning around process, about one letter about, she's part of SAICA, how this would affect her, affect her in the long run. I remember reading all of that. So I have to agree with her. The exact wording I cannot account for, but definitely, that is as she says.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So nothing much I need to pursue there, but it's safe to ask you, Dr. Ngubane has said here that the board actually wanted them back, the executives back. What's your comment on that?
My understanding right from the start, Chairperson, is that people were asked to step aside, to not interfere. That is what my understanding was, and that ultimately they would come back. Obviously, what has now happened in listening to different people testify, you kind of try and now rethink some of it. My understanding at the time was people were saying, there's so much confusion, we've got professional integrity that's been questioned, you as a board are not coming back to us, we want to leave. That was what I understood then. Going back and rereading some of it now, I must admit, rereading Sulufelo's letter, by the way, was the one where I could see she was rather asking questions than saying, I want to leave. So that's on Sulufelo. If I can just add something else. I went back to go and reread Dan Marokani, because the last time I was in the chair here, Chairperson, and I know we want to speed this along, but I think it's important that we clarify this. A letter was put to me that was written by Dan, correctly so, 2 days after his suspension. I think it was the 14th or something.
It was on the 18th.
It was the 18th, okay. And Chairperson, it was presented to me that it came to P&G and it came to Company Secretary and to...
it was addressed to Mr. Tsotsi.
Mr. Tsotsi. I went to go and look through all my mails to satisfy myself that I did not miss it. Chairperson, I could find no record, number one, of when it ever came to me as P&G. Remember, I wasn't chairing?
No, sorry, Ms. Klein.
Okay.
Can I clarify that?
Please do.
No, it wasn't said that the letter came to you as P&G.
Okay.
The minutes of a meeting I'm referring to, which I will find,
Okay.
the board said there, and it's minuted, it acknowledged there is, when I say acknowledged, it accepted that there are these letters from the executives and that Mr. Phukubje, the company secretary, should reply to those letters.
Okay.
And that's the minute which I referred you to.
All right.
But not that you received a letter, no.
Chairperson, thank you. That's clarified. I'm so sorry, sir. Because
Yeah, that's
okay.
all right. Yes, thank you. But my question was,
Yes.
Dr. Ngubane said the board wanted them back. Is that what you understood as well?
From the start, Chairperson, that was always going to be the position. My personal view I've given you on the CE. not on everybody, on the CE. I gave you a particular view on the CE. That was my view.
Yes.
Which I remember I gave you the example of 500,000, but that was my view, and it was based on a perspective from outside of Eskom. But my understanding always was that these people would step aside for 3 months and come back into their roles after 3 months. Not after 3 months, after the investigation had been concluded.
But isn't it that you would have known at the meeting with Ms. Molefe?
Sorry,
Or
Chair?
isn't it that you would have known at the meeting with Ms. Molefe already that it was not the position, that she did not want to come back? On the 4th of May, when Mr. Romeo Khumalo says to her, you have been writing letters wishing to exit from Eskom, she says no, and you were in that meeting. So you would have known then that it is not her intention to leave.
I'm not sure how to answer that, Chairperson, simply
I
because...
think there's a part which I think Mr. Selega doesn't articulate, but I may be wrong. That is,
Yes.
why didn't you say to Mr. Romeo
I was going to be
Khumalo,
asking that.
but the board has no problem with these people. Why should we talk about them, Ms. Molefe, leaving when she makes it clear she is not asking for an exit? I think that's what he's putting to you. Why didn't you say that? Because on your evidence, you knew the board to expect them to come back. And therefore, if a particular executive says, I've not asked for a separation or exit package, and your colleague, Mr. Khumalo, says, no, in effect, even though you haven't asked for it, I think we should talk about your leaving. One would expect you to say, why are you saying that?
Yeah.
So I think he is asking you, why didn't you say that?
Very simply, Chairperson, because we went to that meeting with already prepared numbers to talk about separation. Remember, I have indicated to you that we'd been getting feedback in the board itself that people are wanting to disengage. So I would have had no reason to think that she still wanted to stay. I attended a meeting alongside of Romeo to talk about how to use, I think it was his words or her words, no, his words, how to amicably resolve this. But at that stage, I mean, remember we're talking about from the 13th or the 11th of March, right now to, I don't know, the 4th or the 5th of May, thereabouts.
4 May.
4 May. We're talking about almost 2 months later. I had consistently been hearing people are wanting to leave.
Yes, but the point is, you may have come to that meeting with Ms. Molefe on the understanding that she also wanted to leave. But the moment she clarified the position, that she had not written requesting to be allowed to leave, one would then expect you to say, oh, that changes the picture then, at least as far as Ms. Molefe is concerned. We came here under the impression that all the executives want to leave. She doesn't want to leave, so Mr. Khumalo, why are you pursuing this issue of leaving? That's the point.
Yeah. And Chairperson, quite frankly, I cannot tell you why I didn't answer.
Yes, no, that's
that,
fine.
That I
Yes.
cannot answer.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Mr. Baloyi yesterday testified about his view that the laptops should not be taken away from them.
I'm sorry, Mr. Selega, let's just go back to this.
Yes.
Of course, the question that Mr. Selega puts to you about why you didn't raise this would arise with regard to Mr. Khumalo as well, and would arise even with more force.
Yes.
To say, Mr. Khumalo, here is an executive telling you, I didn't write to you wanting us to talk about my leaving. Why did you then say we must talk about her leaving? You know? And it raises another question, Ms. Klein, namely whether we might not here be dealing with a situation where the board as a body might not have ever taken a decision to say, we don't want them back. But there may have been some individuals within the board who may have been working on the basis that these executives must leave. You understand what
I hear you, Chairperson, and what you're saying is it's possible.
Yes.
But like I said, the question to me was, that I can't answer.
Yes, that's fine.
I can't answer
Yes. Yes. You see, we have a situation where Mr. Matona gave evidence and said, after my suspension, I was so aggrieved that I used my own money to pay lawyers to go to the labor court to get the suspension set aside so that I could go back to my job at Eskom. The labor court said there was some unfairness in my suspension, but referred the matter to the CCMA. At the CCMA, the board delegation asked for a postponement, and they said they wanted to get a mandate from the shareholder minister. And we had two meetings. At the first meeting with the delegation of the board, and I think Mr. Romeo Khumalo was one of them, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Matona says, one of the members of the board who was in that delegation, when I said I want to go back to my job, said, that's off the table. So you have that situation. And then you now have a situation with Ms. Molefe. A delegation of the board is meeting with her on the understanding from what you have said that apparently the executives have been writing, wanting to talk about separation. She makes it clear that I've not written to want to talk about separation. Nevertheless, your colleague, Mr. Khumalo, wants the discussion to focus on exactly that. And that's what happens. So it may well be that it was the board. It may well be that the board as a body didn't have a problem, but there were certain individuals within the board who might have wanted the executives or some of the executives out.
That's possible, Chair. I'm sure
Yes.
you will ask the appropriate people the same question.
Yes,
or the
no,
correct question.
that's fine. We'll hear all the evidence and
Sure.
see at the end what picture emerges.
Of course.
Yeah. Mr. Selek?
Thank you, Chair. And just to strengthen the point further, Ms. Klein, you see that part about Mr. Khumalo saying the investigation will take a while, kind of motivating, separate with the company, because we're going to take a while with the investigation. Now, this is in May, and you will recall that Denton's was appointed in April. And
That's correct, Chair.
yes, they say in their affidavit, which we have provided you with, that they commenced their work on the 20th of April, 2015. They detail what they did in the first week, which is essentially meetings and trying to understand the terms of reference and the mandate. And that's April, May, and then on the 11th of June, they say they are told, please provide us with a draft report. So in their estimation, they say, they are appointed for 3 months, and about 7 weeks into the job, we were told, give us a report. Now that's on the 11th of June, 2015.
July or June?
No, June 2015.
Okay.
You could
Yeah,
refer
no,
to.
that's
yes.
okay, Chair. I accept. The date's all
But
right.
what I'm testing with you is this proposition given to Ms. Molefe that we're going to take a while with the investigation. But in fact, because her contract is only signed on the 25th of June 2015, a settlement agreement, I beg your pardon.
With Denton's.
With Ms.
No.
Molefe.
Oh,
With
Ms.
Ms.
Molefe.
Molefe, yes.
Ms. Molefe, all
The
right.
settlement agreement is signed on the 25th. So what I'm saying to you is the statement made to her, when you look at it on the facts, it could not have been that the investigation was going to take long, and therefore you are advised to settle and separate with the company.
In other
You
words,
appreciate that?
in other words, if Ms. Molefe's evidence that Mr. Romeo Khumalo said to her, after she had clarified that she had not written to the board to talk about leaving Eskom, if her evidence that he then said, you know, the inquiry or the investigation is still going to take long, so maybe we should talk about a separation package, that statement by Mr. Khumalo could not have been true, because Denton's was about to complete its investigation, and the 3 months that the board had given Denton's had not been extended by the board. So he would have known that the Denton's investigation was about to be completed. So one wonders why he would have said to somebody who says, I haven't asked that we discuss my departure from Eskom, why he would have said, you know, the investigation may still take quite long. Maybe we should talk about your separation. One wonders why that statement would have made. Of course, he will come here, he will give evidence. We don't know if he will admit having made that statement, but as I understand your position, you say you recall Ms. Molefe clarifying that she had not written to the board wanting to talk about leaving. Is that right?
That is correct, Chair. And
Yes.
I'm also, like you correctly say, Mr. Khumalo will come here and he will probably, or I'm
Yes.
sure, be asked that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking from my own perspective, would I have known at the time, remember not being a member of Audit and Risk, I wouldn't have known at that time how long that would have proceeded. But I would have known, you are correct, it was supposed to be for 3 months.
Yes, that part you would have known.
Yeah, so I think,
Yeah.
That part
I think you've cleared that.
Yeah, that part you would have known.
Yes,
The other part you would have known is that the board had not extended the 3 months.
exactly.
Yeah.
That had not come. The Denton's things, I think, started coming to the board sometime in July. Memory serves me correctly.
In
25th,
June.
25th of June.
Yeah.
25th of June was the first time Denton's did a presentation, but I think the members of Audit and Risk may have been more knowledgeable at the time as to exactly, you know,
Yeah.
what the position was.
Okay.
Yeah, Ms. Klein, the presentation was made on the 27th of May, 2015.
To Audit and Risk,
Yes, that's the first presentation.
correct.
And, but after that, Denton specifically says, and we have seen its report, they say in this affidavit, they were told to give a draft report on the 11th of June, they are told that. And that's when they stopped the investigation work. You have read Mr. Kabdi's affidavit.
Chairperson, I don't mean to be difficult,
Okay.
but I mean, I was given a document yesterday to read with highlights. I was trying to browse through it as quickly as possible, specific
read it
to
to you.
areas that affected me.
Yeah.
So if Mr. Kapti is saying,
Them with a draft report. So that is in the report itself, which as the board, further Dr. Nkubane, Mr. Khumalo, but it was you and Mr. Khoza who were corresponding with her regarding the settlement discussions. You agree? I see you're nodding.
yes, sorry, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Yes, I would have. As Chairperson of PNG, I would have been at the center of the
Yeah.
discussions for the
The
settlement.
proposal was sent to her and so on. So the point,
Yes, Dr. Ngubani wasn't part of the discussion.
yes, the point I'm making then, just to emphasize, is this, that if, as Dr. Ngubane says, the board wanted them back, If, as you say, the intention has always been they will come back, you wanted them back, then in a sense, there's a window period then between the 11th of June to the 25th of June that you say to her, look, let's drop the settlement discussions, you're welcome back.
Chairperson, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be difficult. I really don't mean to be difficult. But the board, according to me, remember there's audit and risk who's dealing directly with Dentons, giving them instructions and no instructions. According to me, the first time I become aware of the Dentons report and what it says is on the 25th of June, which is when it gets presented. So if you're telling me that there was a meeting where it was agreed on the 11th of June that they must cut their report short, you're going to
You were not part of that meeting.
Please, can you show me? Because I thought I had read everything in connection with Dentons. Dentons, I know, met with us on the 11th, on the 9th of July, sorry, 25th of July, 25th of June, apologies. I think it was the 2nd of July. I think it was the 14th of July. These are all the board meetings where Dentons gets discussed. So if you can just show me the meeting where it gets cut short,
Yes.
I would appreciate that. Just to
No,
appraise
but
myself.
I haven't referred to a meeting, Ms. Klein. I said Denton says in their report and in this affidavit,
Okay.
they received instruction from Eskom that they should provide a draft report. And the ultimate report is dated 2 July 2015.
Correct.
And now you are referring to meetings after the date of
Yes.
that report. That doesn't bear on the point I'm raising with you.
I apologize, Chairperson. I misunderstood. I thought there's a meeting where this is discussed.
No.
Because I'm being asked to comment on why I would have not, with Tulufelo, fought harder if we knew Denton's was going to stop already on the 11th of June. Help me, sir.
No, I'm saying the board, Denton says the board has asked me to stop, not to stop, but to provide them with a draft report. And they say from that moment forward,
Yes.
we concentrated on drafting the report and not the investigation work. And this is Denton saying it's a midpoint report. You have made me not to complete my investigation. That's the board that has instructed.
Maybe let's take it step by step. Is your question based on an affidavit from Denton's
And the report.
and the report?
And the
Okay.
report of Denton's chair.
And the question relates to the proposition that Ms. Klein would have known at the time of the meeting with Ms. Molefe that the Denton's investigation was about to end.
It's based on this fact, Chair. Between 11 June 2015 and 25 June 2015, which is the settlement period, there's a window period. If the board says to Denton, stop, give us a report. You have said you are suspending these people until the end of the inquiry. So here you have shortcut, you have cut it short. It's the time then you say to her, okay, well, the inquiry has been stopped. We are waiting a report. Let's stop the settlement discussions.
Yes.
You may come
I
back.
think the starting point is, do you remember such a meeting of the board or was there a meeting of the board
No,
on the 11th?
no reference to a meeting, Chair.
There is no, oh yeah.
It's
But
Denton.
Denton says on the 11th, they were told by Eskom.
Correct.
They don't say who exactly at Eskom told them.
No, Chair.
Okay. Do you know whether by the 11th of June, the board had taken the position that Denton should submit their report?
No, I don't recall that, Chair.
You don't recall that?
I don't recall it.
Yes, okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. But that is the position. Denton says, on 11 June 2015, the firm was requested to prepare a detailed presentation to the board, in addition to a draft report detailing the state of the investigation to date. You find it in Mr. Kapti's affidavit and in the report itself.
Yes, certainly from the mere fact that Denton's had been given 3 months from sometime in April, is it 20 April? Or sometime in April had been given 3 months to complete its investigation. 3 months from around 20 April, if that is the date, I don't know where I get that date from, would be May, June, or it would be May, June, July. It would be about, yeah, so 3 months would be about July. Now, the first meeting with Ms. Molefe would have been what date? Do you remember? It was end of May?
No, I think you said it
For
was the
May.
4th of May.
For May, or
4th of
early
May.
in May, yes. Okay, so that would have meant that there was still about 2 months to go. But that period would be the same period that the executives would have known at the time of their suspension, because they were told that the investigation had been given 3 months. You know,
That is correct, Chair.
That's what they would have known.
Yes.
You know, so, so if Mr. Romeo Khumalo did indeed say the investigation might take longer, that could only have been understood to mean longer than the 3 months, I would imagine.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yes. But from your own knowledge, as far at board level, there was no basis for any member of the board to say the investigation, Denton's investigation would take longer than 3 months.
No.
Yeah,
No.
because the board had never changed from its stipulation that
Of
3
3
months
months.
was the period.
3 months.
Yeah.
Chair, I do remember a discussion, I think at ARC, and we just need to have a look at the Audit and Risk Committee, where apparently there was a request for additional, I think, if I remember correctly, I think Denton's did come and say they wanted an additional 3 months or something. The actual date of that Audit and Risk Committee meeting, I don't have. But there was such a discussion from what I learned afterwards with the higher budget, etc., which is why I almost think in my affidavit I addressed the fact that I know it was 3 months because of that having been the agreed time frame, but also because of budgetary constraints. That's how I remember it. But, so I know that I heard about another meeting where there was requests for an extension, but I don't remember that having ever been approved or who would have decided that this is where it ends. You'll have to, we'd need to go and look at minutes and
Okay,
things.
all
I would also need to just,
Okay, all
because it's not something I want to go and look at, Chairperson.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Of course, I think it would be fair to say to you, Ms. Klein, apart from the fact that one would have expected you, which we have dealt with, to say to Mr. Khumalo, why must we talk to Ms. Molefe about separation when she's making it clear that that's not what she wanted to talk about, and we as the board actually want them or expect that they would come back. Once he also said the investigation would take longer, one would expect you to say, but where are you getting that from? That's not my information. That kind of thing. You understand that?
I hear you, Chair, but like
Yes.
I said, the one thing that is I'm sitting here now and grappling with what do I remember and what don't I remember?
Yes.
The one thing that was always very big at Eskom is all the noise and people talking to people. And, you know,
Yes.
then you come into a meeting and now you've heard something. So the noise of the investigation taking longer, I had heard. But did I
Yes.
ever see it? Was I part of a meeting where it was said that you've got to
Yes.
now? I can't remember that.
No, that's
and I can
fine.
only talk to what I remember. Unless, of course, I'm given the chance to go back and reconsider
No, that's fine.
my
Yeah,
minutes.
that's fine. Mr. Slay.
Thank you, Chair. By the way, Ms. Klein, I see from Mr. Kabdi's affidavit that in fact the presentation on the 27th of May 2015 was done to the board. He says a presentation was made to the board on 27 May 2015, setting out some of the issues identified by investigation team at the point. Obviously, we received this affidavit yesterday, and we were able to provide you with it only yesterday. So that's what he says there.
I can't argue that. My recollection is, sorry, did you say that you made a presentation? Just help me again there, sir.
A presentation was made to the board on 27 May 2015, setting out some of the issues identified by investigation team at the time. It's a presentation to the board.
And I'm going to go as far as saying to you, Chairperson, without being difficult, I want to have an opportunity to go and take the affidavit and compare
No,
it.
that's
Because,
all right.
Chairperson, the
That's fair
first
enough.
presentation that I have got in the board in committee minutes made by
Dentons.
by Dentons, was on the 25th of June, when I was asked by the committee to go check. He may very well have made that presentation to audit and risk. And I think so.
We can,
Yes.
we
Yeah,
can
we can
verify
please- we can
that.
clarify.
Because he says to the board, we can verify
Please
that.
do.
But also, minutes can be sought
Yes,
to
absolutely.
see
Chair.
whether
Indeed.
there was any meeting of the board on that date
Yes,
and what was the content of the discussion,
Absolutely, Chair.
or whether it might have been a meeting of a committee of the board.
Audit and risk. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And on the extension quickly, because he does deal with it. But this is what he says. He says they came across a minute of the board dated 31 March 2015, in which the board itself was saying, there's a note there, that the investigation could take up to 12 months. And then he says, in the firm's view, Denton's view, it was not possible to exhaustively investigate the matters set out in the TOR and the task order within the 3-month investigation period. The firm's investigation team met at an early stage to discuss the planning of the investigation and the investigation methodology in order to satisfy the requirements of the TOR within the applicable 3-month period. So it seems to from the reading of this, that even though they see the board itself saying this investigation could take up to 12 months, they endeavored and planned their efforts to complete it within 3 months.
I remember reading exactly that, Chair, so I can't, that's
Okay.
100% accurate. I've read that.
Yeah.
Okay,
And go ahead, Chair.
continue.
Shall I? And then he does say, as it would subsequently unfold, the firm was not afforded the agreed 3-month period to complete the investigation. The firm was instructed to cease further investigatory activities after a period of about 7 weeks. In the circumstances, the firm was requested to prepare its report reflecting what he says is a midpoint investigation period. But that is in the report already.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think you get the point. We were saying that window period, more so when the investigation is cut short, and, shall I add, that the investigation was not seeking to determine any wrongdoing on their part. Recall that.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah. And quickly on that, because then you have seen what Mr. Kabdi says about your averment that you approached him. Let me see. In regard to the return of Mr. Kokosori, Chair, I hope you will not lose me because I'm cutting to the chase.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping we can finish with her evidence by 1 o'clock, but I might have forgotten some of the parts that need to be covered.
Yes.
It is important that we cover everything that is important that should be covered with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we have to
Yes.
continue after lunch with her in order to do justice to the issues, so be it.
Yes.
But let's do the best we can to do as
Thank-
much as we can within
Thank
the
you very
time
much.
available.
Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Klein, as I was going there, the chair's talking reminds me something. And I want to draw the parallels between at least Ms. Molefe and what you are going to tell us here regarding Mr. Koko. On your version, you say it was only Mr. Koko who wanted to come back. And you went to find out from Denton's. With regards to Mr. Koko, he was the one executive who was not interested in leaving the employ of Eskom. He indicated that he wanted to come back. In this regard, I contacted Mr. Noor Kabdi of Denton's, who indicated that they had not found any evidence of wrongdoing by any of the suspended executives. Now, you're not saying when did you do this, but we see that you had all the meetings with the suspended executives on the 4th of May, according to Ms. Daniels, because she was present. So she says you had these meetings one after the other, even a meeting with Mr. Molefe on that day at the Protea Hotel. To me, it seems, and you will correct me, Ms. Molefe is in exactly the same position as Mr. Koko. She wants to come back, she lets you know that much. You know that there's no wrongdoing investigation to be done against her. How is it that that situation is different when it comes to her as opposed to when it comes to Mr. Koko? It justifies his return, but is not used for her return.
Can I answer, Chair? Yeah.
Yes.
Chairperson, the significant difference between the two was we went in and there were numbers prepared for everybody to discuss the possible separation, because my understanding was people wanted to leave. Now, fair enough, Mr. Koko's name had never come up. The name that names I had heard come up was Dan Marukane and Zulufelo.
May I interrupt you, Ms. Klein, and I beg your pardon. Forget before, the lead up to the meeting with Ms. Tsolo gets cancelled by her at that meeting. So whatever you heard prior to your meeting with her, she's telling you that's not true. Now take us from that moment onwards, where you know, as a matter of fact, Tsolo says, I don't want to leave. The reasons for my letters is not what you, the delegation, the delegation is not just Mr. Kumalo, it's all of you there. Forget about prior to that. Now you have this situation, you have a fact, exactly like here. He is interested to get his job back. There are no wrongdoings, findings against him. This is exactly Mr. Lofelo Molefe. Explain to the chairperson, how is it that she gets treated differently to Mr. Cook?
Chairperson, I don't believe that she was treated differently at all. We had the sets of numbers there. Zulufelo, in her introductory remarks, said what she did, and Romeo said what he did. I've explained, I cannot tell you why I didn't ask Romeo why he's saying what he was saying. But she looked at the numbers. She took the numbers and she had a problem with various things on the numbers. She took it and she looked at it. Mr. Koko refused to even look at the numbers. He sat in the chair, which is what I said in my affidavit here, and I said it at Parliament. He would not, when we started the discussion, we said what we were there for. We explained to him that we are here to have a look at how we can get to a common ground. He started off by saying to us, my blood is blue and I am going nowhere. I sat with the numbers. I didn't even have an opportunity, like with Zulufelo, to even give him the number. He wouldn't look at it. He just said, guys, I've grown up in Eskom. I want my job back. I'm not prepared to look at numbers. I'm going nowhere.
But do you dispute the proposition that on the understanding, or maybe let me put it this way, you dispute the proposition that
Sorry, Chair.
if you knew the board's position to be that it wanted Ms. Tsholofelo Molefe, like the other executives, back after the investigation. Once she said she was not asking to talk about her separation with you, then you should not have pursued any separation discussions with her. Do you dispute that proposition? In other words, if you were part of a board that you knew wanted her back, or at least had no problems with her coming back, once she had indicated that she is not one of those who had written to say, I want to talk a separation, you should not have pursued with her any separation discussion.
Chairperson, you would remember me saying to you that, and I know that I've been told don't go back. In my mind, she was one of the people, in fact, her name was mentioned, that she wanted a settlement. So coming into the meeting, I mean, if I knew that she didn't want to talk discussion or talk settlement, there would have been no numbers on the table.
No. I understand that prior to your meeting her, your understanding, based on what you had been told, was that she also wanted to talk separation.
Yes.
Okay. But the proposition is, once you were at the meeting with her and she clarified her position, and her position was, no, I have not written to the board to talk about separation. I'm actually happy to continue at Eskom. Maybe she didn't put it expressly like that, but once she had made it clear that she was not one of those who may have written to say, let's talk separation, then you had no business pursuing separation discussions with her as a delegation. What do you say to that?
I totally agree with you, Chairperson. I totally agree with you. And remember, your question was, so why did we continue, and why did
Yes.
Romeo Kamala say,
Yes.
I cannot answer that.
No, you did. Yeah, you said that.
I
Yeah.
cannot answer that.
Yes.
But to come back to Mr. Koko, and why, why was, the man wouldn't even take the paper. He wouldn't look at it.
See, the difference on your evidence, the difference between the position adopted by Ms. Molefe and the position adopted by Mr. Koko, I mean, the position may have been the same, but the articulation of the position might have been different in that maybe Mr. Koko was much more emphatic and maybe didn't even want to look at the figures. But the fact does remain, it seems, that they both contemplated that they should go back. Maybe one was more emphatic than the other. And then, as I say, one would have expected that representatives of a board which wanted these executives back would have said, oh, then that's fine, so there's no need for us to talk separation. You accept that?
I accept that,
Yeah,
Chairperson.
okay.
Ms. Klein, you're saying to the chairperson, Mr. Tsotsi wouldn't even want to look at the figures.
Mr. Koko.
Mr. Koko, I beg your pardon.
Chairperson, that's how I remember it. He came in.
No, that's all right. Okay, you want to carry on? Sorry.
Yeah, no. The one thing that stood out for me was that I don't even think we had much of a chance to speak. He came in, and went for, my blood is blue, I grew up in this organization, I'm not going to go anywhere. And I even remember then, asking him the question about, but do you trust this board? Because I remember with the suspensions, he was the one executive who was the most, almost, not aggressive maybe, but annoyed with the suspension. So now I'm saying to him, okay, your blood is blue, you want to come back, do you even trust, I mean, this is the same board you're going to work with. Will you be able to work with this board? Something to that effect is my recollection, Chair.
Ms. Klein, Mr. Kuku has submitted an affidavit to this commission. He has told in his affidavit what happened in the meeting. And in addition to that, he has attached what he says was a document signed by yourself titled Proposed Terms for Settlement, and it shows the amount. The document is dated 11 May 2015. And I can show you the document. So he did, it seems, look at the document, was in fact provided with it, did go away with it, and he has attached it to his affidavit.
I cannot argue with that, Chairperson. What I'm saying to you is, where with everybody else, you would have had a discussion with it. Mr. Corker was adamant, he's coming back, he wants his job. I do not remember him taking it, but if he's got it, then he must have been given the document like everybody else. That's all I can say to you.
The proposition, obviously, that Mr. Selega is making to you is what Mr. Oko says in his affidavit seems to be in conflict with what you said earlier on. You remember you said you didn't even get a chance to show him the figures. But he seems to suggest that you actually did, and he took the document away, blah, 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 blah. That was the reason you advanced to say the manner in which he responded to your approach as the delegation of the board was different from the manner in which Ms. Molefe responded, because you said Ms. Molefe was prepared to look at the figures, but Mr. Koko was not. But Mr. Koko seems to say, I was given the numbers, I looked at them as well.
Yeah. Like I explained to you, Chairperson, my recollection was, before we could even talk, he wasn't prepared to look at anything. I may very well have given him the document to take with him for consideration afterwards. I can't remember, but that's the only way he would have had the actual document.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Daniels tells this commission in her affidavit, and Ms. Molefe herself says, at the beginning of the meeting, the board delegation tried a different strategy. Mr. Kumalo led the discussion and said that they understood that I had written numerous letters to the chairman, Dr. Ngubane, asking to part ways. I denied this outright, emphasizing that the purpose of my letters, which had not been responded to, was to establish when the so-called inquiry would commence and to get access to the terms of reference so that I could start preparing for the interviews with the investigation. I'll give you a chance to respond.
Is that Ms. Molefe?
That's Ms. Molefe.
Yeah.
Ms. Daniels, who is present there, says, Ms. Molefe highlighted to the board members present that there was a clear contradiction to what had been communicated to them and what was reported in the media. She emphasized that in the 8 weeks since her suspension, she had not had any communication from the board or a response to her correspondence. She had inquired as to what was the position of the board at that point in time. Then Mr. Kumalo, according to Ms. Daniels, says to her directly, without prejudice and reserving the rights of Eskom, the terms of reference for the review were developed by the audit and risk, and this was a separate discussion. Can we find a way of amicably parting ways? But she says herself, I made it clear to them, I'm not asking to go away.
Who is saying, can we find a way of amicably
That's
parting ways?
Mr. Khumalo,
Saying to Ms. Molefe?
to Ms. Molefe.
Yes.
This is Ms. Daniels writing in her affidavit.
Yes, okay. So you have that situation, and maybe there's not much you might be able to say about it. You have a situation where the executive concerned, Ms. Molefe, says, I didn't write to talk about a separation, but it's a member of the board who says, let's talk amicably parting ways. So the question is, why was he adopting that attitude if the board, to his knowledge, had no problem with these executives coming back? Was the position he was adopting reflective of the position of the board as a body? Or is the position that he was adopting a position that did not reflect the position of the board, but reflected the position of either himself or of himself and a few other members of the board? That's the question. And if so, what was the underlying basis for this in circumstances where, when these executives were suspended, they were told it's not on the basis of any wrongdoing. And they were told you would come back after 3 months when the investigation is finished. When did this change? So those are the issues.
And
Yeah.
Chair, and I said to you, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, I should have questioned it at that stage. I cannot answer you at this stage.
Yes.
But I'm sure Mr. Khumalo will give you additional
Yes.
information.
Yes, of course, with regard to Mrs. Molefe, the matter goes further. She has testified that she even threatened to go to court against Eskom. Now, I can't remember whether she said she made that threat at a meeting that she had only with Mr. Khumalo, because she said there was a meeting that she had with Mr. Khumalo where Mr. Khumalo had said to her he was there in his personal capacity. And of course, one has got to ask why he needed to go and see her in his personal capacity, because he was supposed to deal with her as a representative of the board. But she says at some stage in her interactions, either with Mr. Khumalo alone or in a meeting with Mr. Khumalo and other members of the board who were delegated to talk to her, she threatened to go to court. And she says Mr. Khumalo said something like, you don't want to take on the state, or you don't want to litigate against the state. In the end, what we see is that her settlement, the payment, is actually much more than the limit that had been put by the board. As I understand the position, the board had said the executives should not be paid more than 12 months'
Correct.
salary.
Correct.
But she said here that no, ultimately she was paid, I think, something like 1 year, 6 months or something like that, but certainly more than 12 months, you know. And then one asked the question, which of course you and I dealt with last time, but more with her now, to say, why must the board go over even the limit they had put to pay her so much if they want her back?
Chairperson, if I may, firstly, I don't remember in the meeting when we were in that she spoke about litigating. So I think it must have
Yes.
been maybe in
Yeah.
another meeting.
Yeah.
Regarding the settlement for Ms. Malefe, I think I heard counsel ask me earlier that it was between myself and Mr. Corsa. I was not a party to Ms. Malefe's settlement.
You had
I
nothing to
was.
do with the figure
Well, the actual settlement.
or the whole settlement?
The settlement. So,
Okay.
so I was not a party to that. That
Yeah.
was concluded between, I think you'll probably get that in her affidavit,
Okay.
between herself and I think Mr. Corsa.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Klein,
Yes, sir.
I'm not referring to the signing of the agreement. Ms. Malefe has presented evidence that shows that you were involved throughout, up until when she signed. Somebody else would have signed, not you personally, but the build-up to that conclusion that you were part of it.
Chairperson, I'm going to disagree.
You don't recall?
No, not don't recall. I was the chairperson of People in Governance, and that was the one, her and Dan Marakani, where I was not a party to the actual signing off of the figure. So when you tell me that it's 18 months, I must say I'm a little bit surprised, because I was of the view 12 months was the maximum.
Well, the settlement, her settlement agreement is in one of the bundles. It was produced when she gave evidence. But the point I think Mr. Lega is making, and I just want to make sure whether you take issue with that, is that his understanding of the evidence is that you were part of the first meeting with
Yes.
Ms. Malefe, and to the extent that there may have been further meetings, you were part of that. Obviously, you may not have been part of the meeting that she had separately with Mr. Khumalo, where Mr. Khumalo
yes,
said
yes.
he came in his personal capacity. But the point he's making is you might not have signed, but it would appear like you were part of the people who were involved in negotiating
No,
the settlement.
that I agree with, Chairperson.
That you accept?
No, I agree with, I was part of the people, but when you tell me it's 18 months now, I go, okay. that-
So is the position that, as far as you're concerned, is your recollection that she had accepted 12 months, or is your recollection that you don't remember what figures were discussed with her, or you do recall that she did not want 12 months, she wanted more, but you ended up not knowing how much more she got?
I think it's the latter.
It's the latter.
I saw communication, regarding her paying legal fees and something to do with the house and something like that. But with the actual figure, whatever that became, that I was not aware of, because I wasn't part in that last discussions to conclude the final figures with her.
But of course, there wouldn't have been any discussion of legal fees on her part because she had not gone to court, isn't it?
No, but I think she was seeking support for some legal, if memory serves me well.
Yeah.
There was some discussion about legal costs. There was some
Yeah.
discussion about a home in, security
Okay.
or something like that. So what I'm saying to you, I certainly saw, sorry, Chip.
Yes, yes.
I certainly saw communication around that. But what that ultimately became, I must say I was a little disappointed that I wasn't part of the ultimate sign-off of it. But I think I'm not sure whether we're saying the same thing. There was a toing and froing, so it wasn't a straight, yeah, I'm accepting this.
But it seems that what you are saying is that whereas you were a member of the delegation representing the board that was mandated to negotiate with her,
Yes.
somehow you were excluded when it came to what amount was to be paid to her. Is that what you say?
That is what I'm saying. I was
Yes.
privy, chairperson, to some of the communication.
Yes.
But when it came to what it was, I mean, if you were to, when you told me the other day when we were here about it was 18 million, the thing is, as people in governance, you must make sure that governance is followed. But if something happens outside of what I have actually seen, I cannot attest to that. That's something whoever else was involved with must come and give you the breakdown as to the
Yeah.
why. I remember, like I say, that the proposal put to her the first time, she questioned certain things about why certain things wouldn't be included. So that's where I am at that.
Okay, all right. We are at 1:06. You want to follow up
Yes,
with a
Chair.
few questions?
Just
Yeah.
quickly. Ms. Klein, it's not being put to you that she was paid 18 million.
No, not her.
Yes.
No, I think Chairperson said last time
18
together.
months.
Yeah, it's 18 months the chairperson was referring
No,
to.
we're talking about 18 million last time.
Yes,
Yeah, for all of
For
them.
all, that's what I was referring to.
but it cannot, sorry.
And,
Let me
and
say this to
18 might have been a wrong figure arithmetically. But
So
maybe
we
it was,
wouldn't
yeah.
know because we don't have
Breakdown.
an annual, the breakdown.
yeah.
Ms. Klein, you would have requested the figures from Anton Minnar.
Yeah.
That's what he says in his affidavit.
Absolutely.
You requested the settlement figures from Anton Minnar.
Yes.
You have sent an email to Ms. Molefe on the 11th of June 2015.
Yes.
You say, "Hi, Solofelo, here with our settlement agreement, having taken your mail of earlier today into account, kindly revert to me with your input or questions." You asked for that. And I remember I referred...
And what date is that?
That's 11 June 2015, Chair.
Okay.
So the first meeting is the 4th of May.
Yes.
Then they have a meeting on the 8th of May. And you sent her a proposal, Ms. Klein. Is it on the 8th or the 11th of May? At your second meeting?
I'm not sure. No, I think I would have given her a proposal
Correct, yes.
at the first meeting.
Yeah.
And then, are you saying there was a
I have it. I have
Okay.
it. It's the 8th of May.
all right?
It's exactly like the tabulation is exactly like Machela Koku's one, with
Yes.
your signature at the end of it,
Okay.
and a provision for the executive to sign.
Yes.
It has an amount. Amounts are reflected in there.
Right.
8th of May. But that gets overtaken by events.
Right.
Because we can see your email on the 11th of June, 2015. More than a month later, the 8th, the 11th of June. And you are saying, herewith our settlement agreement having taken your mail of earlier today into account, kindly revert to me with your input or questions. And she writes back to you. So you would have known about the inputs or questions that she had. You would have been involved in the negotiations of the terms and the figures.
But I did not argue that I was.
Okay.
In fact,
Yes,
I indicated,
yes, I think she accepts that she
Okay.
was
Oh,
involved in the
absolutely.
negotiations, but all she's saying is when the amount was offered or agreed, she was not part of that.
the actual
So
signature,
the
the
actual
role.
amount,
Yeah.
final amount that was agreed.
But it would be interesting, Chairperson, I would like to maybe just for clarity, was that number, that one that was on that final proposal, is that the same number that was ultimately paid? Because that I don't know. And I guess that's what I'm saying. I took cognizance of all of the input she made, which was security and various other things. What
There's
I'm
a
not
ref-
sure of
Yes,
is...
there is a reference where you were reading
Yes.
her email to Ms.
To the
Mulefe.
Fed.
You said, it says, here is a proposal after taking into account your
Yes.
mail. So
She said,
let's go
herewith,
back to Ms. Mulefe's mail and see what she has said there, if we have it.
yeah, she didn't attach a response to this, Chair.
Oh,
And,
okay.
and Chairperson, if I may, do you have a list of what she was ultimately paid out? Does that proposal give you an amount? And
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it bears any relevance. I'm just,
No.
I must say, I felt left
It's
out.
legitimate to check.
Yes.
If you
I'll
could
let
just
you
check
know.
that, please do.
I can let you know what I see from the documentation.
Okay.
What Eskom ultimately paid,
Was
I
different.
do not know.
Oh, okay.
So the settlement proposal,
Yes.
which he has given to us along with this email,
Yes.
has an amount.
Okay. But
That
maybe if you can
amount-
check it, yeah.
That amount, it's said to a total separation payment, should I mention the amount, Chair? The
Yes.
amount is there.
I think you can mention it.
Yes, it's a little over 4 million,
Okay.
4,032,945. Your proposal, however, on the 11th, on the 8th of May, had other items to it, and the total amount was a little over 5 million.
Okay.
I can indicate to you.
So I offered more than what was original. I'm trying to just get my head around.
No,
Now,
it's not.
what we can do, let's take the lunch break. During the lunch break,
Yeah, please
you
do.
can look at those things. When we come back, there may be a resolution.
That's right, Chair.
And it may be that somebody in your team could even phone Ms. Molefe. She might be available, she might not be available. She
Yes.
might clarify some of the things that we talk about to say,
Yes.
you know,
The actual amount
yeah,
paid.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that is, if anything turns on that,
Yeah,
Ms. Lane.
I'm not.
Yeah, in the end, what remains is that certainly on her evidence, she was paid as part of the settlement more than the 12 months salary that the board apparently had set as a maximum. And Ms. Klein confirms that at the first meeting with her, she did make it clear that she had not written to the board to invite discussions about separation. And of course, she testified here that she even threatened litigation at some stage. And I asked her, what would you have achieved with litigation? And she said, well, the suspension would be set aside and I could go back. You know, that's what she said. So let's take the adjournment and let's come back at 2:15.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we adjourn.